What would you do if the person you love tried to erase the woman who raised you, slowly, quietly, drop by drop? Tonight's story follows Ethan Ward, a son and a physician who starts to see patterns that don't lie, a moving pill box, a bitter cup of tea, and a smile that never reaches the eyes. As the pieces click into place, love turns into evidence and a marriage becomes a crime scene. Stay with me, because the truth you can't unsee is about to surface, and the camera never blinks. If you enjoy dramatic, high-stakes stories like this, you'll find more on Cheating Stories 7. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me your take in the comments. Would you confront first or collect proof? Now take a breath and step with me into She Lied for Years. A cheating wife tried to erase my mother. I fought back. Ethan Ward measured truth the way he measured vitals, with data, with patterns, with what didn't add up. After the fall that turned his mother's steps into winces, he moved Margaret into the front bedroom that caught the morning light. He expected the house to soften around them. Instead, it collected hairline fractures of unease, the way glass collects stress along a fault. It started where most dangers pretend to be kindness, at the tea tray. A mug tasted faintly metallic one day, dull the next. The pill organizer he refilled every Sunday night migrated an inch at a time, like a clock hand you weren't supposed to notice. His wife, Lena, was sunlight when he was home, warm voice, soft hands, and a colder weather system the moment his taillights vanished down the street. Margaret said nothing. That was her nature. Endure now, protect later. Ethan told himself stress makes ghosts of ordinary things, but stress doesn't change timestamps, and timestamps don't lie. The entry camera stitched together a private timeline. 10:41 p.m., Lena slipping into the garage. 11:03 p.m., returning with her phone locked, hair smelling faintly of a cologne Ethan didn't own. That night, a crumpled receipt rode the dryer's warm breath onto the floor. Boutique pharmacy, cash purchase. Supplement drops, no loyalty points, no insurance trail. He lifted it between two fingers the way ER nurses lift unknown vials. New vitamins? He asked, neutral as charting. Lena kissed his cheek. You're overworked, she said, and laughed the way people laugh when they want a sound to stand in for an answer. It almost worked. He wanted normal more than he wanted proof. He walked the kitchen perimeter like a detective trespassing in his own life. Tea ring near Margaret's chair, a honey spoon licked clean but sticky at the window over the sink reflecting a man who looked tired and newly awake. He checked the back door. The deadbolt turned with an easy click that felt suddenly imprecise, like a joke where the punchline never lands. Outside, the garden told a different story. Ethan had rebuilt the bed so Margaret could tend roses from her wheelchair. Now the leaves dulled despite perfect watering and measured shade. Soil fatigue, Lena said, already tapping an order for mulch without asking. Ethan knelt and sifted loam through his fingers. The earth gave up a clear bead, half a dropper tip ruptured. It winked under the porch light like a dare. He bagged it in a sandwich zip he labeled with a date and time because habits, once learned in emergency rooms, don't unlearn themselves easily. He tried to sequence it all like a case. The receipt, the camera pings, the garden bead. The pattern was small, then not small at all. Margaret watched him watch the house. When he met her eyes, they steadied first. You are my son before you are anyone's husband, she said, the way mothers store knives as sentences. If you feel a shadow, don't apologize for turning on the lamp. He pressed his forehead to hers and promised nothing. Oaths were cheap, vigilance was work. He timed his next arrival for the gap between Lena's calendar blocks. The garage door hummed closed just as his key found the lock. The hall smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and something sweeter underneath. From the front room, Margaret's television murmured a quiz show, volume lower than usual. Ethan stood in the doorway and scanned automatically. Cup on saucer, pills at 2 o'clock, water carafe beating with condensation. How's the hip? He asked. Argumentative, she said, and smiled the way people smile when they don't want to complicate what you already carry. Upstairs, Lena hummed behind a cracked bathroom door. Messages pulsed on her phone screen and died the instant his shadow crossed the threshold. "You're home early," she called. Brightness stretched a shade too thin. "Thought I'd cook," he said, opening the pantry. He reached automatically for the chamomile, for the honey, for the ritual that once meant comfort. The kettle sang. As steam feathered the air, he caught a glint by the sink, a tiny plastic cap nudged behind the soap pump as if light itself had almost refused to show it. He plated dinner for 3 and listened to the way plates sounded on wood. In those inches of silence between small talk and forked tines, he heard the house propose 2 versions of itself. One where nothing was wrong and he was paranoid, one where the floor plan hid a trap. He chose neither. He chose to keep measuring. Later, when the dishes dried in their racks, Margaret reached for his hand. Her palm was cool and certain. "You'll know when you know," she said, "and when you do, don't be gentle with a lie." Ethan nodded. Upstairs, a door clicked. A laugh fluttered and went silent mid-flight. He stood beneath the ceiling and felt the whole structure hold its breath, as if the beams themselves understood that the next small thing would not stay small. The door that changed everything wasn't locked. It simply shouldn't have been open. Ethan came home early and heard voices drifting from the guest bath. Lena's undertone, another voice pitched low, intimate, amused. He stood in the hallway long enough to realize he could name neither word, only shape. The speaking stopped. Sink water replaced it, then the crisp click of a perfume cap. The second voice vanished like steam. Lena stepped out, wiping her hands, phone face down, smile already assembled. "Surprise lunch?" she said. He held her gaze just long enough for the silence to admit it had something to hide. He cooked instead of answering, because knives and kettles tell fewer lies. Margaret took chamomile with honey. Ritual steadied the room. When he turned back from the stove, he caught Lena's reflection in the microwave door. Contempt tightened, then quickly smoothed, as if a seamstress had pulled a thread and made an ugly hem tidy. "I'll take it to Mom," she said, reaching for the cup. The liquid tilted at the threshold and hung there, one deliberate beat too long. Ethan's hand arrived gently, neutral. "I'll do it." A muscle jumped in her jaw, then reset into a smile that showed too many teeth. In Margaret's room, the old woman's fingers trembled around the saucer. She thanked him, sipped, paused, a small crease forming between her brows the way paper remembers a fold. "There's a bitterness, darling." The sentence was careful and unafraid. Ethan took the cup without flinching and set it aside. He told her about the open door, about the boutique receipt, about the glass bead in the garden soil that glinted like a dare. Margaret listened like a witness taking an oath, palms flat, eyes steady. "Then we stop being polite with shadows," she said. "We name them." Naming a shadow requires light and a place for it to fall. That night, Ethan made the house grow eyes. A tiny pinhole camera nested inside a hollowed novel on the shelf, lens threading daylight between 2 spines. Another mic hid in a ceramic bird on the sill, its glazed beak pointing at the world as if in song. He tested the angles, then texted Daniel Ortiz, hospital counsel friend, the man who knew how to turn panic into paperwork. One sentence: "If I'm wrong, I'll apologize forever. If I'm right, I'll need you." The phone rang inside a breath. "Evidence first, confrontation last," Daniel said. "And Ethan, don't be the last to know your own life." Upstairs, the guest bathroom vent whispered like a throat clearing. Ethan passed the doorway and saw only absence. No second toothbrush, no damp towel but his. He checked the trash. A tissue layered with foundation lay beneath a new liner, fingers' worth of haste pressed into it. On Lena's nightstand, a notification pulsed and died the instant his shadow crossed the frame. He lifted the phone and read the screen without unlocking it. Marina, a location pin settling under the hospital's supplier lot. He took a photo of the preview before it faded, the way you photograph a comet and only later decide what it means. He lay beside the woman he had vowed to trust and counted the seconds between her breaths like a metronome for a song he didn't want to learn. Sleep came slow and professional, the kind that isn't rest so much as a shift change in the brain. At 2:17 a.m., a floorboard sighed. He let the sound travel. At 2:20, the refrigerator motor clicked on and masked a second sound, front door soft. The camera in his mother's room returned nothing but her calm breath and a rectangle of streetlight on the wall. Sometimes not catching a thing is the catch. Morning rearranged the evidence into ordinary shapes. Coffee made the kitchen smell like mercy. Lena wore a crisp blouse and a voice tuned to daylight. "You were sweet last night," she said, as if that were the point of the night. "We should do a date dinner this weekend." He said yes because no is a tool you use after you've measured the room. "Also," she added, too casual, "I moved Mom's vitamins into a prettier box. The plastic one was depressing." He looked where the organizer should have been and found a lacquered tin with a painted peony. Dose order rearranged, colors reassigned. "It's pretty," he said, and hated the way the word felt like capitulation. He carried fresh tea to Margaret and swapped the lacquered tin for the old organizer he'd kept in the closet, refilled according to the chart he documented on paper, not phone. "If anyone asks," he told her softly, "the tin was too heavy for your hands." "If anyone asks," she replied, "I will tell them my hands have better things to do than hold lies." At noon, Lena sent a text with her phone angled toward the floor, the way teenagers think makes them invisible. He watched its reflection in the black screen of the turned-off television. A thumb typing, the pause, the send. A minute later, the live feed from the hollow book caught her entering Margaret's room with a sweetness that could have been love if you didn't measure angles. "Drink while it's hot, Mom, Margaret," she said, placing the cup just close enough to be kind, just far enough to require help. When she turned to fetch a napkin, the camera saw her palm hover an inch from the saucer, indecisive as a thief in a store with mirrors. Ethan didn't storm in. The first wrong door had taught him something about timing, how truth needs an audience and a stage dressing. He recorded a second angle for the afternoon he knew was coming. He set a calendar block labeled sutures so colleagues would leave him alone. He walked the rooms and tried on each possible version of the next day. The ugly confrontation that produced only tears and counter-accusations. The quiet capture of a single damning act. The flight of a woman who already knew which exit led to whoever waited at the supplier lot. By evening, the house felt like theater lighting down to half, the way stages look right before the curtain rises. Lena rehearsed normal, hand on his shoulder while he cut carrots, a joke about his oversalted eggs, the soft brush of lips at the back of his neck. Her performance was almost perfect. Only her eyes betrayed the overtime they worked, flicking once too often toward the hallway where a mother slept and a camera waited to be sure. Ethan salted the pan, not the wound, and accepted the moment as cover. "Date dinner," she reminded him as they ate. "Saturday, that new place with the chandeliers." "We'll see," he said, and smiled in a way that promised neither yes nor no, only a conclusion. Margaret ate little, she watched everything. When he tucked her in, she touched his cheek with the gravity of a benediction. "You don't have to save me to be my son," she said. "But I won't stop you if that's the direction your feet want to go." He kissed her forehead. In the doorway he stopped, listening. Upstairs the vent whispered again, and the house learned how to hold its breath for one more night. Morning sunlight slanted through the blinds as if it wanted to soften reality, but the feed on Ethan's phone told a story no light could erase. The hidden lens caught Lena wheeling in a tea tray, her expression practiced, her movements rehearsed. She placed the cup close enough to tempt, but not close enough to comfort. The pill organizer sat just beyond reach like bait. "Drink while it's hot, Mom, Margaret," she cooed, but her hand dipped to her pocket. A flash of glass. A dropper. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. Two colorless beads slid into the amber tea, almost invisible. Almost. Margaret's eyes flicked toward the door as if she sensed the lens watching. She whispered, "My hands are clumsy today. Would you help me?" Lena tilted the saucer to her lips too fast, letting a small spill streak the table. "Oh, clumsy me," she muttered, voice flat when she thought no one listened. "I'll get a cloth." She turned, and the camera captured her breathing change, shallow, excited. The sound of someone who believed the room was hers. Ethan entered not as a furious son, but as a doctor with steady steps. His calm was a weapon. "I'll take over," he said, easing between his mother and his wife. The cup rested untouched on the nightstand. Lena's eyes flicked a pause, a calculation. Of course, she said, tone syrupy but stretched thin. I'll run some labs on Mom today, just for peace of mind. Her smile faltered. Labs for what? For clarity, he answered, watching her betray herself. She reached for the cup, then froze, fingers hovering midair, retreating too late. The gesture was its own confession. When the shower hissed upstairs, Ethan slipped into the garage. The air smelled faintly of cologne he didn't wear. In the tool drawer under a strip of painter's tape, he found a second car key and a thin locker tag, stamped with a number he knew well. Supplier lot. Marco Vass, procurement liaison. The man who had been too eager to buy Lena dinners, too familiar with her laugh. Ethan held the tag like evidence at trial. It wasn't only his mother's safety at stake, it was betrayal wearing two faces. That afternoon, the lens showed more. Lena in Margaret's room again, phone pressed to her lips. Her voice dropped into a whisper sharp enough to cut. He's suspicious. I can accelerate it if we switch to the other stuff. A muffled male reply followed. The accent, the cadence, Marco. We keep it slow, he can't know. And remember what we said about the old photo, make her break something he loves. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. It wasn't just poison, it was orchestration, strategy. The plan wasn't to kill fast, but to dismantle trust, to make Margaret's decline look natural, to make Ethan doubt himself. And when the photo, his favorite picture with his mother, was destroyed, it wouldn't be an accident. It would be war declared in silence. He closed the app and sat in his car outside the hospital lot, staring at the tag in his palm. The betrayal was no longer theory. It had a name, a voice, a partner, and Ethan Ward, doctor, son, husband, was no longer willing to play polite with shadows. It happened on a Tuesday of hard rain, the kind that turns gutters into thin rivers and makes houses sound like they are thinking. Lena stood over Margaret's open album, the bench photo of mother and boy in a summer that no longer existed. You still think you own him, she said softly and tipped a full glass. Not a splash, not clumsy. An execution. Water sheeted over the page, blurring Ethan's freckled child face and Margaret's tired, incandescent smile into a smear of gray. Margaret gasped, hands fluttering helplessly over dissolving paper as if she could hold a memory together with skin. Ethan was already in the hallway. He did not clear his throat, did not cough his presence into the room like a warning. He watched Lena straighten, lift her chin, and whisper to the ruined photograph, "We're almost done." That was the sentence he needed. Cruelty is never so honest as when it believes itself unobserved. He stepped into the doorway. Done with what? She flinched, then performed. Tears arrived with professional speed. She's confused, Ethan. She's been accusing me, imagining things. The picture was an accident. I tripped, the glass slipped. I tried to save it. He held up his phone and let the room hear what it had already lived. Rewind, play, the whisper intact, clinical. We're almost done. The shape of Lena's face changed in real time, like wet clay losing the hand that made it. Sit, Ethan said. His voice had a new geometry, angles you could cut your hand on. We're going to talk like adults who understand consequences. He placed the boutique pharmacy receipt on the table. Next to it, a sandwich bag with the bead of glass from the garden. He listed the timestamps. Garage at 10:41, return at 11:03. He spoke about the dropper, the two colorless beads that the camera had seen slip into tea, the muffled male voice that belonged to the hospital's procurement liaison. He did not type adjectives, he presented exhibits. Lena's performance wilted, then hardened into a shape nearer to her. You won't leave me, she said finally, each word with the weight of a dare. You can't afford a scandal, you're up for section chief. You need my version of you. Without me, you're just a technician with a good bedside manner. She miscalculated the size of the thing she was threatening. Ethan turned to his mother and reset his tone. We're going to be very boring for a little while, he told her gently. Test results. Lawyers, locks changed. He did not look back at Lena when he added, boredom is safety, I choose boredom. He texted Daniel 3 words, it's all real. The reply came back like a blueprint rolled onto a table. Preserve everything. Move liquid assets beyond Lena's reach. Alert Adult Protective Services quietly. Schedule a wellness check to create a paper trail, and then a line Ethan hadn't expected. There's chatter about Vass, kickbacks. If she's in that stream, we widen the river. Ethan stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The room rearranged itself, not just a wife poisoning a mother, but a conduit between a household and a scheme. He changed the front door code before dinner. He fitted a new deadbolt on the interior garage door while rain drummed its indifference on the roof. When Lena drifted in, she watched the tools with delicate disdain. "You're making the house ugly," she said. "No," Ethan answered. "I'm making it honest." She smiled in the small, crooked way people smile when they are deciding which version of themselves will be most useful. "Imagine how this will look," she murmured. "A promotion committee hearing you put cameras in your sick mother's room, hearing you accuse your wife. It's not a good story for you." He did not rise. "It's a perfect story for the truth," he said, and handed her a printed notice from APS, neutral as a calendar reminder. A welfare visit was scheduled for Thursday. The paper was light in the hand and heavy in meaning. Margaret, towel drying the damp edges of the album, looked up at the sound of her son's voice. "We're not going to fight in front of you," Ethan told her. "We're going to document." She nodded, a small bowed motion of relief and resolve. Dinner was a ritual without warmth. Lena set the table with symmetrical precision and never met anyone's eyes. Ethan served smaller portions than usual and sat where the sight line to Margaret's doorway stayed clear. Rain pressed harder at the windows. On the television, a muted weather map looped a red band of storms across the city like a wound that wouldn't close. "We could still end this privately," Lena said conversationally, as if bartering over a dress in a shop. "We could make it a misunderstanding. You give me a clean exit, I give you silence." Ethan chewed, swallowed, and let the quiet answer her. After dinner, he collected the tea service himself. In the kitchen, he lined 3 cups in a row and labeled the bottoms with strips of tape marked A, B, C. He filled it with boiling water straight from the kettle and sealed it in a sterile jar. He filled B from the same kettle and set it next to the saucer Lena always favored, then sealed that too. He left C empty and photographed the arrangement with a time stamp. He was not performing for Lena. He was performing for later. When it was time to say goodnight to Margaret, he paused beside the album's ruined page. "I'll get this reprinted. Better paper. Lamination. Waterproof ink." Margaret touched the pallid ghost of the bench with a fingertip. "Memories don't drown," she said. "They learn to swim different." It was not a request for rescue, it was permission to fight. He returned to the living room and found Lena waiting with a smile arranged like a weapon she had forgotten to sheath. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room," he told her, "for exactly 1 night." She laughed softly. "So you can pretend you aren't already sleeping with your mother between us." He didn't take the bait. "1 night so I can hear which doors open." The house spoke near midnight, a single soft footstep, a pause, another. Ethan lay in the dark and mapped them. The guest bath door, the linen closet, the pause at the top of the stairs where a camera's red eye lives if you know where to look. He let the steps continue and did nothing. "Patience," he reminded his blood. "We're building a case, not a scene." In the morning, he filed an internal incident report at the hospital, careful and unaccusatory, naming no one, flagging a concern about an elder at home and possible caregiver negligence. Paper that looks like nothing until someone asks when the first record appears. Daniel texted again at noon. "Vass meets suppliers off-site. There's a locker and there are shells. We're drafting. Keep her talking. Keep the cameras rolling." That evening, Ethan placed the laminated lab requisition on the counter where Lena would have to touch it to move it. She did with 2 fingers like something sticky. "You are humiliating me," she said, voice losing its choreography. "You think you're the only person in this house who knows how to record." He met her stare. "Then you know how this ends, with records." Her eyes cooled into something honest and cold. "You'll miss me," she said finally, not as a plea but as a prediction. "Sooner than you think." She turned, and for the first time since the rain began, Ethan believed the weather might be changing for him too. Not clearing, not yet, but breaking. He set 2 glasses on the table and filled them with plain water. He drank his. He left hers untouched. In the corner, the album dried in slow waves. Upstairs, a vent whispered, a sound like a throat preparing to speak. He texted Daniel a single period, the dot that means I received everything. Then he sat in the doorway to Margaret's room and listened to his house become a statement instead of a question. The locker held more than romance. It held arithmetic. Ethan and Daniel opened it with a warrant and a poker face, 2 blank ledgers with carbonless pages torn out, a burner phone still warm from a charge, 3 brown bottles labeled as herbal supplements, and a ziplock of receipts that didn't know they were confessions yet. The labels said Valerian, Melissa, Chamomile. Daniel scanned a QR code on the side panel and shook his head. The manufacturer's real, but the lot numbers loop, he said. Counterfeit sleeve. He photographed the lot codes, the caps, the tamper rings, then lifted the ledgers by their spines. Missing sheets. Someone thought paper is safer than a server. Someone is wrong. The burner braided 2 crimes into a single rope, messages scrolled like a nausea. Marco moving small invoices through the clinic's procurement. Round to nearest 100. No flags. Marina, the old woman won't be a problem by spring. Eat more of the clear, the bitter one she notices. Unknown alias Stonebridge. Shipped to West loading dock after 6. Nobody signs. Daniel's contact traced Stonebridge to a Shell LLC routing equipment orders through a cleaner vendor, then back into the hospital at a markup that looked innocuous until you saw the repetition. Romance wasn't an accident, it was logistics. Love letters as purchase orders. A supply chain with a heartbeat. Ethan didn't rage, he built. Rage ruins chain of custody. He built a timeline with screenshots, call logs, camera stills stamped to the second. He built a second angle for the bedroom cam, narrower, aimed at hands. He built a calendar entry that placed him in surgery while he sat in his car across the street, watching Lena test a new bottle on the tip of a spoon, smile at how it vanished into tea, then place the cup an inch farther away than kindness would require. He texted Daniel, "Need talks." Daniel texted a name. The toxicologist ran a discreet panel. Margaret's blood came back with whisper-thin traces consistent with repeated microdoses of a sedative that metabolized fast. Enough to wobble a gate, muddle a sentence, fray a memory, the toxicologist said. Not enough to scream on labs unless you're looking. Ethan was looking. He also called Marco. "We need to talk," he said, neutral as triage. They met in a corporate lobby washed in expensive light. Marco wore a suit he hadn't earned and panic he couldn't hide. "You're sloppy," Ethan added, sliding a single printout across the marble side table, a transfer from Stonebridge to his cousin's bar, rounded numbers, memo line, fixtures. "Turn on her before she turns on you, or go down for both." Marco stared at the numbers like they might become smaller if he blinked hard enough. "What do you want?" he asked. Ethan smiled without humor. "Everything you've got before I come back with people who carry badges." Marco's throat worked. His eyes flicked to the revolving door as if escape could be architecture. "She said you'd fold," he muttered. "She said you're soft where your mother is concerned." Ethan leaned forward. "She's right. Soft isn't the opposite of strong." Daniel arrived and set a recorder on the table, its red light a polite warning. "State your name," he said. Marco did. "And the nature of the scheme," Daniel continued, voice even. Marco exhaled a life he could no longer afford. He described padding equipment invoices by 6-9% across multiple POs to keep any single bump unremarkable, running the overage through Stonebridge and paying it back out in cash and favors. Trips, dinners, a down payment on a car that Lena drove when Ethan wasn't home. The poison. She said it was for sleep. Then she said the bitter one wasn't working. The clear one was better. He winced, called the older woman inventory. I told her not to text that word. "Phones," Daniel said. Marco handed over 2, the burner from the locker and a second cheap handset taped under his desk drawer. "Backups," Marco said. "Insurance." Screens lit up. Threads unfurled. Marina again, the alias that had pinged Ethan's screen as a friendly contact, now naked as Lena's voice notes. In one she laughed softly. "Slow is kind," she said. Kind looks good on paper. They left the lobby with a box that didn't rattle when carried because guilt is heavier than glass. In Daniel's office, they worked the evidence like surgeons. Gloves, labels, a chain of custody log written in ink that couldn't be edited by panic. Ethan marked the times Lena's drops aligned with changes in Margaret's vitals. The morning she nearly fell transferring to the chair. The afternoon she forgot the neighbor's name. The evening when sleep came like a blackout. The pattern held. Small doses, regular intervals, a fade that could be mistaken for age and sorrow. He went home and rebuilt his plan around the new facts. Confrontation was no longer the goal. Conviction was. He installed the second angle, adjusted the hollow book half an inch for a clearer view of the saucer's lip. He set a batch of unpoisoned tea aside in labeled jars for the toxicology comparison. A. Kettle only. B. Kettle plus cup untouched. C. Kettle plus cup after Lena's hands. He used a fresh box of gloves and photographed everything because photography is an argument that knows how to testify. In the evening, he presented the smallest possible trap, normalcy. "Date dinner Saturday?" Lena asked, almost cheerful. "The one with chandeliers." "We'll see," he said, smiling like a man who had stepped out of a fire and hadn't told his clothes yet. She flicked her eyes toward the hallway. "Your mother resting?" "She's reading," he answered and let the lie breathe. Margaret was downstairs with Daniel's APS contact, reviewing what to expect in a wellness check. Questions asked gently, answers that landed like evidence. Paperwork that looked like nothing until it was the only thing that mattered. At midnight, Ethan sat in the car across from the supplier lot and watched Marco hand over a padded envelope to a man whose coat had too many pockets. He filmed the exchange without zooming, knowledgeable enough to keep a wide shot for context. The next day, Daniel's contact in compliance pinged. Internal audit had been sniffing around procurement for months. Vass's name surfaced like a bad penny. "If we tie caregiver abuse to procurement fraud," Daniel said, "no one will want to touch this with a PR glove. They'll want it clean, fast." "Good," Ethan said. "Clean and fast are my favorite adjectives." He called Marco again, not to threaten, but to choreograph. "You will text her tonight," he said. "You will ask her to confirm the plan in her own words. You'll say, 'I'm on to you, you're scared, you need to finish sooner.' She will tell you to slow down or speed up. Either way, she'll choose a verb." Marco hesitated. "She's not careful," he said softly, as if he were asking permission to believe it. "No," Ethan said. "She's bold. Bold forgets the camera." When the text arrived on the burner, "Finish sooner," he's jumpy. Switch to clear only, Ethan printed it and added it to the growing file, a case that could stand without him if it had to. He tucked Margaret in and told her the part that mattered. "We're not improvising," he said. "We're reading sheet music the law understands." She smoothed his sleeve with 2 fingers. "Then play to the end," she said. "No rushing." In the morning, he walked past Lena at the counter and kissed the air near her cheek. She smiled with all her teeth. "You look tired," she said. "You should rest." He poured water into the kettle and watched steam rise like the world's most ordinary miracle. Behind him, on a quiet shelf, a tiny lens waited to catch something extraordinary. A hand, a tilt, 2 invisible drops that would turn a suspicion into a sentence. No door kicking, no shouting. Ethan came home at his usual hour, kissed Margaret's forehead, and set 2 placemats at the dining table as if routine were a shield. Lena arrived with practiced poise, napkin folded like a white flag she had no intention of honoring. Ethan set his phone on the runner face up. "We're going to watch something," he said, voice level, and airplayed the feed to the TV. Lena's whisper, the 2 colorless drops, the call about accelerating. When she reached for his wrist, he slid his arm away as if moving glass. The moment registered in her eyes. The old choreography wouldn't work. "You think a jury will believe video without context?" she said, voice flattening into something utilitarian. "I have context. Caregiving is messy, so is marriage." Ethan nodded as if agreeing to a definition. "So is embezzlement." He opened a manila folder and let pages speak, locker photos, bank trails, Stonebridge transfers, and Marco's written statement, short, devastating, notarized. This is the part where you confess to the smaller sin to dodge the bigger one. Don't. We're past bargains. She recalculated. You will ruin your career, she said. The hospital doesn't promote men who can't control their houses. He felt a distant pity for the person who believed that sentence was power. I don't want control, he said. I want air my mother can breathe. A knock at the door. Not police, Daniel and an APS officer for a scheduled welfare check, procedure dressed in polite clothes. The officer's badge caught the chandelier light. MS, Ward, we'd like to visit with Margaret and review medications. Lena smiled thinly. Of course. They worked methodically, names confirmed, dates, a gentle inventory. The officer photographed the lacquered tin, then the original pill organizer Ethan had restored. She examined residue in the cup Ethan had sealed and labeled, logged chain of custody with a ballpoint pen that clicked like punctuation. Daniel read the room the way lawyers read transcripts, for what wasn't said. He asked for the household medication list. Lena produced a typed sheet with dosages that didn't match the chart on Margaret's nightstand. The mismatch went into the file. Any recent falls? The officer asked. Near falls, Ethan said and cited dates. Lena cut in smoothly. Her balance varies. Age, you know. The officer nodded, neutral. We'll send a follow-up nurse to evaluate mobility and environment. Rails, lighting, transfer, safety. Paper building itself into something heavier than paper. Back in the dining room, Lena didn't cry. She laughed, a small, hard sound. You'll miss me, she said, sooner than you think. Ethan tilted his head. Under the threat he heard logistics, the way someone times an exit. Upstairs, a smoke alarm chirped once, the single mechanical syllable houses use when they want attention. Everyone paused. Battery, Lena said lightly. I'll fix it. I'll handle it after our guests leave. Ethan replied, already mapping possibilities. Heat on high, a pan smoking, a pretext to send him running while a thumb slides over a cloud backup toggle. APS concluded the visit with a calm summary. A number to call, a note about follow-up, a polite thank you for your time that sounded like a countdown. When the door closed, the house exhaled. Ethan kept the TV paused on the still frame of Lena's hand poised above the cup. Context, he said softly, is continuity, and the camera doesn't blink. Lena placed both palms on the table and leaned in. You want me to say it? Fine. I'm not the woman you married. I'm the woman who married the life you built and found it incomplete. She smiled without warmth. I upgraded it. She tapped the folder. And yet here you are, begging strangers to validate your hurt. Ethan slid a second folder across the table. I'm not begging, I'm serving notice. Inside, a draft petition for protective order, a notice of separation, a list of items to be retrieved by a third party at a scheduled time, a stipulation requesting that all electronic devices remain powered and surrendered to a forensic specialist. Her gaze flicked to the last page. You can't make me sign this. Correct, he said. The court can. She straightened, recalculating again. So what now? You call the police, parade me past the neighbors. No, he said, we wait. He turned the TV sound on just loud enough to hear her recorded whisper fill the room again. She looked at the screen and finally stopped pretending she was alone in her own narrative. Upstairs, the smoke alarm chirped again. Ethan stood. Stay, he told Lena, not as command, but as boundary. Daniel trailed him to the stairs, murmuring, if she tries for devices, we go to Plan B. On the landing, Ethan paused, not for drama, for evidence. The kitchen camera had a clear angle on the stove. No flames, no pan on high. He moved to the office, external drive connected, status light steady. He checked the router cabinet. A thumb drive protruded halfway from the USB port like a tongue mid-lie. He photographed it, removed it, bagged it. When he came back down, Lena's posture had changed, coiled, then very still. Battery replaced? She asked. Battery removed, he said. Daniel took a seat, casual as a cat. We'll be here until the follow-up call from APS logs, he said cheerfully. They are efficient. The rest of the evening was a study in sustained, weaponized normalcy. Ethan reheated soup. Lena declined. Margaret dozed with the remote in her hand, the channel stuck on a show where everything resolves in 44 minutes. At 9, Ethan placed 3 labeled jars on the counter, A, B, C, and took a photo with a timestamp that included a clock in the frame. "Insurance," he said to no one in particular. Lena tried one more angle. "You loved me." "I loved a story I wanted to be true," he said. "Now I love facts." She smiled that small, crooked smile again. "Facts can be edited." "Not the way we keep them," Daniel said, nodding toward the folders. "Not for long." The house grew quiet around 10. Rain that had threatened earlier passed, leaving the roof ticking as it cooled. Ethan walked Lena to the threshold of the guest room but didn't cross. "Someone will be outside all night," he said. "A very boring someone. Think of it as neighborhood watch with a law degree." She didn't answer. She closed the door. Ethan pulled a chair into Margaret's doorway and sat with his back to the hall, his phone face-up on his thigh. On the screen, a small red dot pulsed, recording. He texted Daniel 2 words, "hold position," and received a period in return, the leanest language of professionals who have run this play before. On the table downstairs, the paused video waited, Lena's hand forever hovering over a cup it would never again be allowed to touch. The smoke alarm stayed silent. The house, for the first time in weeks, sounded like a house, plumbing settling, wood remembering its shape. Ethan closed his eyes without sleeping and felt a different kind of countdown begin. Tomorrow would not be loud. It would be exact. The smoke wasn't fire. It was a pan left on high, a perfect accident if you needed the house to fill with confusion at the precise minute you deleted cloud backups. Ethan took the stairs 2 at a time. In the office, Lena's fingers were a blur, the cursor chewing through folders like a small, obedient animal. He reached past her, pulled the power cord, then slid the external drive from the drawer she'd assumed was invisible to him. The screen went dark mid-command. "That's evidence tampering," Daniel said softly behind him, voiced the sound of a door closing. Lena's breath hitched once, then steadied into something that sounded like calculation. Downstairs, the APS follow-up nurse arrived with the unhurried authority of people trained to build facts out of rooms. She checked rails, lighting, transfer space, medication lists. Ethan handed her the jars labeled A, B, C, and the chain of custody sheet. The nurse noted the USB thumb, the unplugged external drive, the router cabinet photo. "We'll log this," she said, neutral as gravity. "You should expect a call." It came faster than anyone needed to breathe. 2 officers at the door, polite as weather, asked for the devices and for Lena to remain where she was. Daniel passed them the warrant. They watched the paused video of the dropper. They logged the lab results. They accepted Marco's sworn statement by email. Handcuffs sounded loud in a house that had learned to hold its breath. Lena didn't struggle. She turned once as if to rehearse a farewell, then looked past Ethan like a person reading a distant sign. "You'll miss me," she said again, but it had stopped sounding like a threat and now sounded like a habit. Pretrial was a corridor of forms and clocks. A judge read the safety order Ethan had filed and signed it with a pen that made a thin, decisive line. "No contact," she said, eyes on Lena, "and surrender all devices for forensic imaging." Marco, coached by counsel who had measured his fear, flipped with the relief of a man who had found the right side of a closing door. He produced the second burner, the ledger pages he had torn but not destroyed. The text "where finish sooner" sat between 2 emojis as if sentiment could disguise intent. The prosecutor's table became a still life. Vials, ledgers, a phone in a clear bag, a printed transcript with 3 names and 1 plan. In court, the case looked simple because simplicity had been engineered out of complication. The video spoke first. A hand, a tilt, 2 drops. The toxicologist translated traces into plain language. The APS nurse read from the home assessment, each neutral sentence fitting into the next like bones making a ribcage. Compliance walked through the procurement fraud with a pointer and a patience that made theft sound boring, the worst fate for a scheme that believed itself glamorous. on a screen. The Shell LLC diagram collapsed like a child's paper fortune teller when you tug the wrong flap. Lena's attorney tried to build a story from sentiment. A devoted caregiver exhausted, a marriage frayed by a demanding career, an elderly woman whose memory sometimes wandered. He asked the jury to squint until poison looked like tea and theft looked like rounding. But the jury had been trained for weeks to open their eyes. Facts accumulated the way snow does, quiet at first, then a weight that changes roofs. They returned a verdict that didn't sing. It clicked. Guilty on attempted poisoning of a vulnerable adult. Guilty on conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge's sentence threaded accountability through two domains: time in state custody, restitution to the hospital, mandatory counseling that would teach a vocabulary she had no use for until that day. Ethan sold the big house, not as exile, as choice. He told the realtor he wanted a place with less echo and more mourning. He and Margaret moved to a smaller home with one good window per room and a kitchen that admitted only the necessary light. He had the ruined album reprinted from the original negatives he had begged from the photographer's son. New paper, pigment that wouldn't run, one favorite page laminated so water could never win again. On the first morning in the new place, he taped the laminated page to the fridge with blue painter's tape. Margaret laughed. "Art gallery," she said. "Admission by kindness." At the hospital, he declined section chief with a thank you that sounded like a promise to invest elsewhere. He drafted a modest proposal that didn't brag, just worked. Caregiver screening at intake, APS training for residents, a one-page checklist for home risk that asked the right blunt questions. He gave short-in services on how to hear what silence tries to say. He discovered that the word vigilance could be taught without scaring people if you said it softly and backed it with steps. The victim impact statement he wrote for sentencing used no adjectives. "I am a physician," it began, "and a son." It ended with one sentence: "My mother is still here." It landed like a gavel. Afterward, strangers touched his elbow in corridors and didn't know what to add. He nodded for both of them. On a bench that looked like the one in the photo, different park, same angle, Margaret leaned into his shoulder. The winter sun made ordinary work of shining. "Don't let this sour you," she said. "We survived by refusing bitterness." Ethan nodded. Revenge had always felt too easy, like slamming a door you plan to open later just to slam it again. Justice was duller and more permanent. It left space for breath. He texted Daniel a single word, "Thanks," then opened his phone to the camera app and deleted the profiles one by one. He kept the files for the law and let the lenses go. Houses, any houses, deserved to be ordinary again. He didn't look back. Somewhere across town, Marco was giving another statement. A man re-editing his life for lenience and learning how expensive sentences can be when you've spent months saving pennies on the truth. Somewhere else, Lena was learning the math of consequences, how time divides a day into equal parts no matter how you plead. Ethan chose different arithmetic. Small dinners, roses that recovered, morning pills that clicked into Monday without fear, the daily work of dignity. When he slept, he dreamt of his mother's hands steady over a teacup, the quiet miracle of liquid that only warms. He woke to find the world had not ended, only narrowed into something truer, which is a kind of mercy stronger than victory. That's where Ethan chose justice over bitterness. He didn't chase a scene, he built a case. The result was simple because he made it undeniable: video, timestamps, toxicology, a paper trail that spoke for itself. His mother stayed, the truth held, and a life rebuilt itself around morning light, not fear. What would you have done differently? Was there a moment you think Ethan should have confronted sooner or later? Share your thoughts below. Your perspective helps others who might be standing in the same quiet hallway, measuring the same uneasy patterns. If this story resonated, please like the video, subscribe to Cheating Stories 7, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring you more true-to-life drama and hard-won lessons every week. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.